The alien princess thought she was a common man until he drew his blade. Princess Liara of Valoria sat quietly in her chambers, staring out at the purple skies of her planet. The palace was alive with preparation for her wedding, a union meant to secure peace between Valoria and Earth. Every corner of the great hall was being decorated with glowing crystals and ribbons that shimmered like liquid light. Nobles bustled about, checking arrangements and whispering in haughty tones. Liara could hear the soft rustle of silk and the clatter of ceremonial swords being polished. Yet, none of it brought her joy. She had seen the guest list. Her husband-to-be, the human Ethan Cole, was listed simply as a civilian advisor. Not a warrior, not a noble, only a simple man from Earth. The thought of spending her life with someone so ordinary made her stomach twist with unease. Many of her own people had already expressed doubt, saying humans were weak, fragile, and naive. They wondered aloud how a princess of Valoria could be paired with someone so unremarkable. She tried to ignore it, reminding herself that duty came before desire. Her handmaid, Tessa, approached and offered a tray of glowing fruit. "Your Highness, are you ready for the feast?" she asked gently. Liara shook her head, her dark hair falling over her shoulders like a curtain. "I do not feel ready, Tessa," she admitted. "He is a man of Earth, nothing more. How can I trust him with my life, with the throne, with everything?" Tessa smiled faintly. "Sometimes, Highness, what seems ordinary is not always as it appears. Give him a chance. You may be surprised." Liara did not respond. She wanted to believe it, but her heart was heavy. The palace was not a place for doubts. It was a place for strength, for order, for control. She had been trained all her life to lead, to protect, to be vigilant. And yet, when it came to this human, she felt unsure, almost powerless. The sun began to set over the sprawling palace gardens, turning the purple sky to deep orange. The first guests started to arrive. Valorian nobles in shining robes and heavy jewels floated down the corridors, their voices echoing through the tall halls. Liara adjusted her ceremonial gown, a flowing garment of silver and blue, embroidered with patterns that shimmered under the crystal lights. She felt the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on her. Each step toward the hall reminded her that this was not just a wedding. It was a political contract, a symbol of peace that the entire empire was watching. When Ethan arrived, he did so quietly. There was no grand entrance, no noble escort, no display of wealth or power. He wore a simple suit of dark blue, tailored but modest, with a faint earth insignia on the chest. The contrast between him and the elaborate Valorian nobles was stark. Whispers spread through the hall like wildfire. "Is that the human?" one noble muttered. "He looks so ordinary," another scoffed. "How can a human hold the princess's hand?" Liara felt a strange mix of embarrassment and curiosity. She had only seen Ethan once before, briefly, in a formal meeting. He had been quiet, polite, and careful with every word. Now, standing in the center of the hall, he seemed calm, almost unafraid of the sneers and laughter around him. The feast began, and Liara took her seat beside him at the high table. She observed Ethan closely. He ate slowly, with care, showing respect to the Valorian customs he did not fully understand. When a noble raised their glass in mockery, he smiled politely and bowed slightly. It was a small gesture, but it caught Liara's attention. There was a quiet strength in him, an awareness she could not explain. After several courses, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the hall. Palace guards shouted, and some nobles rushed to stand in the way. Liara's heart pounded. She saw shadowy figures moving swiftly, their movements precise and coordinated. The hall fell into confusion. Guests screamed and tried to flee. The human beside her stood up calmly, scanning the room with sharp eyes. "Stay close to me," Ethan said softly, almost whispering. Liara did not move. She watched in disbelief as he stepped toward the shadows with steady, confident strides. Without drawing a weapon, he intercepted one of the attackers with a swift push, sending them sprawling. The guards scrambled, but Ethan continued to act, moving with an ease that made the trained Valorian soldiers stumble to keep up. Liara's breath caught in her throat. All her life, she had seen humans as fragile, weak, and incapable of real combat. Yet here was one human, standing calmly in the middle of chaos, not panicking, not begging for help, but controlling the flow of danger with every precise movement. The attackers, realizing they underestimated him, advanced with glowing blades. Ethan stepped back for a moment, then spoke quietly, almost to himself. They think fear will stop me. With a sudden motion, faster than the eye could follow, he disarmed one of the attackers and used the momentum to knock another unconscious. The room was in awe. Even the nobles who had mocked him were frozen in shock. Liara felt a strange stirring in her chest. She had never seen bravery like this, not in Valorian nobles, not in the fiercest warriors of her empire. Ethan did not shout or rage. He moved with focus, control, and skill. Her mind raced. How could someone so simple, so ordinary in appearance, be capable of such precision? When the last of the attackers fled, the palace guards regained their composure and secured the doors. Whispers filled the hall. Some nobles were angry, some afraid, and some, like Liara, were quietly amazed. Ethan returned to his seat beside her, breathing steadily as if nothing unusual had occurred. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm and even. Liara nodded, unable to speak. She watched him, seeing for the first time the depth of his presence. He was not just a civilian advisor. He was someone who had trained, prepared, and endured challenges she could not even imagine. Her heart, which had been heavy with doubt, now felt a spark of something new. Curiosity, respect, and a hint of awe. That night, Liara could not sleep. She lay in her chamber, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the calm, ordinary human who had just saved her life. She remembered the stories she had heard of humans as fragile creatures, weak in comparison to the might of Valoria. Yet Ethan had shattered every expectation. He had drawn no special attention to himself, yet his actions spoke louder than words. He was skilled, disciplined, and unafraid. He had shown her a side of humanity that she had never believed existed. As the palace slept, shadows moved in secret corridors. Some were spies. Others were assassins sent by nobles who feared the human skill. Liara knew that this night was only the beginning. Peace was fragile, and enemies lurked in every corner. But, for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this man, who seemed so ordinary, was more than she had ever imagined. She rose from her bed and walked to the balcony, looking at the glowing city below. The wind swept her hair back, and the stars of Valoria shone like distant diamonds. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Perhaps I have judged too quickly." Far away, Ethan stood in the palace hallway, inspecting the locks and doors, ensuring no one could harm the princess again. His calmness was unshakable. He had been sent as a protector, not a prince, not a noble, but a guardian. The empire may see him as weak, but he knew his strength. And Liara, the alien princess who thought she had wed a common man, would soon learn that ordinary is only a mask for the extraordinary. And so, the night ended with the palace quiet once more, but the air was thick with tension, curiosity, and unspoken questions. Liara knew that her life, and perhaps the future of her empire, had just changed forever. She had married a human she thought ordinary, but in that night of shadows and danger, she realized that ordinary could be deadly, calm could be strong, and a man could be more than anyone expected. The first part of their story had begun, quietly, with whispers, fears, and a blade unseen by most. Liara would never forget this night, nor the calm, steady gaze of Ethan Cole, the man she had thought was common, but who had already proven he was far from it. The morning after the attack, the palace was unusually quiet. The grand halls, usually filled with servants and nobles, seemed empty, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Princess Liara walked slowly through the corridors, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. Ethan had saved her, yet he had done it without boasting or drawing attention. His calmness, his skill, and his confidence had left a deep impression on her. She found him in the garden courtyard, leaning lightly against a railing and watching the sun rise over the distant mountains. The light painted the sky in gold and violet, but Liara barely noticed. She approached cautiously, unsure what to say. She had expected him to be proud, perhaps even smug, but Ethan's face was serene, thoughtful. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning, Princess," he replied, turning to smile briefly. "I trust you slept well?" Liara hesitated. "I cannot say I slept peacefully. Last night changed many things for me." She paused, then asked the question that had been troubling her. "How are you so capable? You were supposed to be a human, not trained for this palace, not a warrior." Ethan's expression did not change. "Humans are capable of more than they seem. Some of us are trained for dangers that most people cannot imagine. I was sent here to protect you and to ensure the safety of the Alliance." Liara frowned. "Sent? By whom?" "By Earth," he said simply. "I am not a noble. I have no claim to titles or lands here. I am only a protector. My presence may be unexpected, but my skills are genuine." She stared at him. For the first time, she understood that his humility was real. He did not seek praise, nor did he care for the opinions of the Valorian nobles who had mocked him. And yet, his strength was undeniable. She felt a strange mix of admiration and fear. He was a human, yet more than human in the way he had moved, thought, and acted. As they spoke, palace guards hurried past, checking the halls and doors. Some whispered to each other, still shocked by the events of the previous night. Liara noticed that Ethan's gaze never wavered. He observed everything: the guards, the shadows, the entrances. He moved as if the palace were a chessboard, and he already knew every possible move. "You are always alert," she said quietly. "Even now, after everything." "I must be," he replied. "The danger is not gone. Someone wanted to harm you, and that someone may return. We cannot be careless." She nodded slowly. Fear mingled with respect. She had been trained to recognize threats, yet she had never felt as powerless as she did during the attack. Ethan had saved her life with skill she could hardly comprehend. And now, she realized, she had to trust him if she wanted to survive. The day passed in a tense quiet. Liara observed Ethan as he moved through the palace. He spoke politely to servants, nodded to guards, and made small adjustments that prevented minor accidents. When a guard tripped and almost fell into a fountain, Ethan was there in an instant, steadying him with a calm hand. No one had asked for help, yet he noticed every detail. Liara began to see that his actions were deliberate, precise, and almost effortless. Later, she walked with him through the palace library, a vast room filled with books, holographic records, and maps of Valoria and the surrounding space territories. She had come here to distract herself from worry, but Ethan's presence made it difficult. He studied the maps carefully, noting the positions of security checkpoints and possible weak spots in the palace defenses. "You know this place too well," she said, amazed. "I have studied it since my arrival," he said. "It is my duty to understand every detail. Danger can come from any direction, and I must be prepared." Liara realized that what she had thought was ordinariness in him was actually discipline, training, and careful observation. Humans may appear weak, but Ethan proved that strength could take many forms. She began to wonder what other abilities he might hide, and why the Empire had allowed someone so capable to be seen as a simple human. The afternoon brought a meeting with the Imperial Council. Nobles crowded into the chamber, their robes glittering in the crystal light. Many of them still whispered about Ethan's actions the previous night. Some were angry, some impressed, and some openly jealous. Liara felt the tension as soon as she entered. The council demanded an explanation, and all eyes turned toward Ethan. "This human," one noble said, his voice sharp, "saved the princess. But who is he really? Why was he in the palace? And why should we trust him?" Ethan remained calm. "I am here to protect the princess and ensure peace between our worlds. I am not seeking power, only to fulfill my duty. My skills are what they are, and my purpose is clear." Some nobles grumbled, but others nodded in cautious agreement. Liara could see that his calm presence was changing the opinions of even the most skeptical members. The council did not like it, but they could not deny the truth. Ethan had saved lives. He had demonstrated skill, strategy, and courage. He had proven that humans were not as weak as Valoria had assumed. After the meeting, Liara walked with Ethan back to her chambers. She could not stop thinking about the subtle ways he had already begun to influence the Empire. He did not seek recognition, yet his actions spoke louder than any words. She felt a mix of admiration, curiosity, and a strange affection. For the first time, she realized she might have misjudged him. "You are different from what I expected," she said, her voice quiet. "Different in what way?" Ethan asked. "Stronger," she admitted. "Calm, aware, capable. You are not ordinary, as everyone thinks." "You are," she paused, searching for the word, "extraordinary." Ethan's eyes met hers. There was no pride, no arrogance, only quiet understanding. "Thank you," he said. "I do what I must. That is all." Night fell again, and the palace lights flickered softly in the gardens. Liara could hear the distant hum of airships and the occasional call of a Valorian guard. Yet the palace still held secrets. The shadows had not disappeared, and some nobles were already plotting against the human who had saved their princess. As she prepared for bed, Liara reflected on the day. She realized that she had been judging Ethan by appearances, by expectations, and by the opinions of others. Now, she saw that strength could be hidden beneath calmness, that courage could be quiet, and that a human could be more than anyone had imagined. In the shadows, unseen by most, spies moved silently through the halls. They watched Ethan, noting his every movement. Some whispered warnings into communicators, planning ways to test him, to challenge him, to see if his strength was real. Little did they know that he had anticipated such moves, that every corridor, every door, every guard was already in his mind. Liara's thoughts returned to the day's events. She realized that her life, and perhaps the future of the Empire, depended on trusting Ethan fully. She had expected a weak human, someone to be shielded and guided. Instead, she had a protector who was strong, capable, and calm under pressure. She wondered how many battles he had fought before arriving on Valoria, how many dangers he had faced, and how much more he could do to safeguard her and the Empire. As she drifted into a restless sleep, Liara felt a sense of anticipation. The palace, the council, and the Empire itself were about to see more of Ethan Cole, the human who seemed ordinary but was anything but. She realized that the first attack had only been a glimpse of what was to come. There would be tests, challenges, and dangers ahead, and she knew now that with him by her side, she could face them. In the quiet hours before dawn, Ethan moved through the palace once more. He checked locks, watched shadows, and ensured the safety of every corridor. He did not move for recognition or reward. He moved because it was his duty, because he had been trained to protect, and because he understood the value of vigilance. Liara, awake in her chamber, sensed his presence even without seeing him. She felt a strange reassurance, a calm she had not known before. She realized that her judgment of him had been flawed, that ordinary humans could hide extraordinary skill, and that appearances could deceive even the most discerning eye. And so, the second day ended with the palace still quiet, but the tension remained. Nobles whispered in the dark, shadows moved with unseen purpose, and the Empire held its breath. Yet in the heart of the palace, Liara felt hope. She had married a human she thought common, but he had already shown her a new truth. Strength is not always visible, courage does not always shout, and a protector can come in the form of someone entirely unexpected. The story of Liara and Ethan was only beginning, and the Empire would soon learn that humans were not to be underestimated. What appeared simple could be deadly, what appeared calm could be formidable, and what appeared ordinary could change the fate of a world that the palace had never felt so tense. Whispers moved like shadows through the grand halls, and even the most confident nobles avoided Ethan Cole's gaze. Princess Liara walked beside him through the corridors, her eyes scanning every corner, every arch, every glimmering crystal. She had come to trust him, but trust did not erase caution. She could feel the Empire holding its breath, unsure whether the human they had mocked and dismissed would become a hero or a danger. They reached the throne room, a massive hall with ceilings high enough to touch the stars, and floors polished so perfectly that they reflected the light of thousands of crystals. The Imperial Council had gathered again, summoned after news of unusual activity near the palace walls. Ethan's calm presence contrasted sharply with the nervous energy of the council members. He did not bow excessively or seek favor. He simply stood beside Liara, his eyes sharp and aware. One of the more arrogant nobles, a man named Velen, spoke first. "Princess, this human continues to linger in our halls. We see his skill, yes, but skill without rank is dangerous. How can we trust him?" Liara's voice was steady. "He saved my life, Velen. He acted when others hesitated. He is not here for titles or power. He is here for duty," Velen sneered. "Duty is no shield against ambition. He is clever, but cleverness can hide betrayal." Ethan's expression did not change. He looked calmly at Velen and said, "I do not seek betrayal or ambition. My purpose is to protect the princess and this palace. If my presence troubles the council, I am prepared to leave. But I will not ignore threats or failures that endanger those I am sworn to protect." The room fell silent. Many nobles were shocked by his calm directness. A few muttered in fear, realizing that this human was not as ordinary as they had believed. Liara felt a sense of pride, tempered by worry. She could sense that danger was still close, lurking in unseen corridors. Without warning, alarms rang through the palace. Red lights flashed along the walls, and a deep vibration shook the floors. Palace guards shouted commands, but confusion spread quickly. Shadowy figures were seen moving along the outer walls, and some were already inside. It was clear that the previous night's attack had been only a test. The real assault had begun. Liara felt her heart pound. "They are back," she whispered. "Stay close," Ethan said. His hand brushed lightly against hers, a quiet reassurance. "Follow me, and do not panic. Trust me." He drew a blade from a hidden sheath at his side. It was unlike any weapon the Valorians had seen. The metal glowed faintly, etched with strange symbols that seemed to hum softly. It was slender but strong, and Ethan held it with the ease of someone who had used it countless times. The attackers came quickly, moving with speed and precision. They were armed with Valorian energy weapons and strange alien devices that distorted the air around them. Palace guards tried to hold them back, but they were overwhelmed. The human stepped forward without hesitation. With a single swift movement, he struck down the first attacker, using a combination of skill, momentum, and precision that left the Valorian guards staring in disbelief. Liara watched, frozen and amazed. She had seen skilled fighters before, trained warriors from Valoria's finest academies, but none moved like Ethan. He was calm, fluid, and deadly. Each motion was calculated, yet effortless. The attackers faltered, confused by his speed and skill. One of the shadowy figures lunged at Liara, and she screamed. Ethan was there in an instant, intercepting the attacker with a single, precise motion. The blade sang as it moved, cutting through the air with perfect control. The attacker fell, unconscious but alive. Ethan did not hesitate, turning instantly to face the next threat. Palace cameras recorded the battle, transmitting images across the empire. Nobles watching from distant chambers gasped. They had believed the human to be weak, fragile, and unskilled. Now they saw the truth. He was far beyond ordinary. After several minutes, the attackers were either defeated or retreating. The palace guards, inspired and shocked, began to recover and push back the remaining threats. Liara could barely speak. Her mind raced, trying to understand what she had just witnessed. The man she had thought ordinary had fought with skill beyond her comprehension. He was trained, experienced, and utterly fearless. Ethan turned to Liara, sheathing his blade with calm efficiency. "Are you all right?" he asked. Yes," she stammered. "But how? How can you move like that? You are human." "Humans cannot," he smiled faintly. "Humans can do many things. We hide our strength, our skills, because we prefer peace. But when danger comes, we rise to meet it. That is what I have done. My purpose is clear, and I do not hesitate when others falter." Liara felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. She had married someone she thought common, someone ordinary, but she had been wrong. He was extraordinary in every way, calm in chaos, deadly when needed, and protective beyond expectation. She realized that the Empire had underestimated humans for centuries, and she had almost done the same. The Imperial Council arrived shortly after the battle. Nobles whispered nervously, their eyes darting toward Ethan. Some were angry, others afraid, and a few seemed to understand that a new reality had dawned. Ethan did not speak unless asked. He simply stood beside Liara, his calm presence commanding more respect than any speech could. One noble, a woman named Leora, stepped forward. This human fought with skill we have never seen. We misjudged him. He is no ordinary man. Liara nodded. He saved my life. He saved the palace. We owe him our trust, not our scorn. Ethan spoke then, his voice quiet but firm. My actions are not for recognition. I do not seek praise. I do what must be done. This palace, this princess, and this empire deserve protection. I will continue to fulfill my duty, no matter the opinions of those who doubt me. Some nobles murmured in grudging agreement. Others remained skeptical, but no one could deny the truth of what they had seen. The battle had proven that humans were capable, that strength could come in unexpected forms, and that calmness could mask extraordinary skill. After the council meeting, Liara and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool and fragrant, and the soft light of the twin moons reflected off the water features. Liara felt a mixture of relief and lingering tension. She realized that the Empire's perception of humans had changed, and that her own perception had changed as well. She had judged Ethan by appearances, but appearances could deceive. "Why did you not tell me about your skills?" she asked quietly. "I was not here to impress anyone," he replied. "My duty is to protect, not to boast. The moment of need revealed my abilities. That is all." Liara looked at him, seeing the depth of his calm, his confidence, and his skill. She realized that he had been preparing for challenges she could not imagine, and that he would continue to do so, silently and effectively, as long as he was needed. That night, the palace was secured, but the air remained heavy with tension. Shadows still moved in secret corridors, and some nobles whispered about the human who had shattered their assumptions. Liara, however, felt a new sense of understanding. She had married a man she thought ordinary, but he had shown her that humans could be extraordinary. He had taught her a lesson she would never forget. Strength is not always visible. Courage does not always shout. And a protector's value cannot be measured by rank or appearance. As she lay in her chambers, she thought of the calm, precise movements, the way he had faced danger without hesitation, and the quiet confidence that radiated from him. She realized that the first attack had been only a hint of his abilities. There would be more challenges, more threats, and more tests of skill. Yet she felt a strange reassurance. With Ethan by her side, she could face anything the galaxy might throw at them. And so, the story of Liara and Ethan continued, now marked by the revelation of extraordinary skill, courage, and calm. The Empire had seen proof that humans were not to be underestimated, and Liara had learned a new truth about the man she had married. Ordinary, she realized, was only a mask. Behind it lay strength, courage, and the power to change the fate of worlds. The palace was tense again the morning after the attack. Whispers filled the halls, and the nobles gathered in small groups, their faces a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Some could not believe what had happened the night before, while others were angry that a human, a simple man from Earth, had proven far superior to Valoria's trained warriors. Princess Liara walked quickly through the corridors, her mind racing. She knew that the Empire now faced a choice: accept Ethan Cole as he was, or see the fragile peace collapse under fear and prejudice. Liara reached the council chamber, where the nobles were already gathered. Their robes shimmered in the morning light, but the colors did not hide the tension on their faces. She could feel their eyes on her and on Ethan, as if her presence could tip the balance of the Empire. She glanced at him. He stood quietly, calm and prepared, his hands folded in front of him. Even in the face of suspicion and anger, he radiated confidence. One of the older nobles, a man named Vander, stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Princess, we must discuss the human. We cannot ignore what we witnessed. His skill is remarkable, yes, but he is not of our people. How can we trust someone whose loyalty is unknown? Some of us believe he should be removed from the palace immediately, Liara's heart beat faster. She could not let them act without understanding. She raised her hand. Enough, she said firmly. Ethan Cole saved my life, and he saved the palace. His actions were not for recognition or reward. He acted because it was necessary. I trust him, and I expect you to do the same, or risk the consequences. The council murmured, some angry, some reluctant. Ethan stepped forward calmly. My loyalty is not in question, he said. I am here to protect the princess and ensure the peace between our worlds. I do not seek power, titles, or recognition. I act because it is my duty, and my duty is clear. There was silence. The words hung in the air, firm and undeniable. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably. They had thought they could intimidate him, but he stood without fear, without arrogance, only confidence in his purpose. Liara felt a surge of pride. She had married a man who not only protected her but also held the courage to face the empire with truth. Vander spoke again, his tone sharper. But what if his presence brings more danger? The first attack may have been only the beginning. We cannot ignore the risk. Ethan nodded slightly. I am aware of the risk. I have trained for it, and I have prepared for it. If my presence causes harm, I will leave the palace. But abandoning my duty is not an option. The danger is real, and I will meet it. Liara watched him, feeling her respect grow even stronger. She realized that his calmness was not weakness, and his humility was not submission. He had strength beyond measure, discipline beyond understanding, and courage that inspired even the most doubtful nobles. She knew she could rely on him, no matter what came next. The council debated, voices rising and falling like waves. Some argued for the human to be honored, others for him to be exiled. Liara could see the fear in their eyes, the fear that humans were not what they seemed. She stepped forward. This debate is pointless, she said. Ethan Cole has proven himself. He is not here to threaten the empire. He is here to protect it. If you cannot see that, you are failing in your duty. The room fell silent. No one could argue with her words. Liara had spoken not only as a princess, but as a leader, and the council could not ignore her authority. Ethan stood quietly beside her, his presence calm, but commanding. He did not seek praise, yet his actions and words had spoken louder than any speech. Later, Liara walked with Ethan through the palace gardens. The air was cool, and the light of the twin moons reflected off the fountains and flowers. She felt a mixture of relief and lingering worry. She realized that the empire now recognized humans as strong and capable, but she also knew that some nobles would never trust him fully. Danger had not passed, and threats would continue to emerge. You were right about them, she said softly. Some will never see your worth. Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm. That is true. Some see only what they want to see, not what is real. But we cannot change them. We can only act according to what is right. Liara nodded. She understood now that his strength was not just in skill or courage, but in patience and wisdom. He did not need to prove himself constantly. He let his actions speak, and that was enough to shift the balance of the empire. That night, alarms rang again, but this time Liara was prepared. She and Ethan moved through the palace quietly, checking corridors, entrances, and hidden passages. Shadows moved, as they always did, but this time they were aware of him. The palace guards followed his guidance, no longer panicked or confused. Ethan's strategies, simple and precise, allowed them to anticipate the movements of the intruders. A small group of attackers entered from a hidden entrance. They were fast, armed, and skilled. But Ethan met them without hesitation. His blade moved with precision, deflecting attacks and disarming opponents in a way that seemed almost effortless. Palace guards watched in awe, realizing that the human was not just skilled. He was a teacher, a guide, and a protector all at once. Liara stayed close, observing him. She realized that his calmness was infectious. The guards moved more confidently, the palace seemed safer, and even she felt less fear. Ethan's presence changed everything. What had seemed impossible, the protection of the princess and the palace against skilled attackers, became achievable because of him. After the battle, the intruders fled, and the palace was secure once more. Liara turned to Ethan, her voice quiet but firm. You do more than fight. You teach, you guide, you inspire. I never expected this, he smiled faintly. It is my duty. Strength is not only in the blade, but in knowledge, preparation, and calm. If we are ready, threats are easier to face. Liara realized that the Empire had much to learn from humans. They had underestimated them for centuries, assuming weakness where there was strength, simplicity where there was skill, and humility where there was courage. Ethan Cole had proven that humans could be extraordinary, and that ordinary appearances could hide unimaginable power. The next morning, the council met again. This time, their voices were quieter, their arguments less sharp. Even Vander looked uneasy, aware that the human had changed the balance of power. Liara spoke first, her words calm, but commanding. Ethan Cole is here to protect this empire and this princess. His actions have proven that humans are capable and loyal. Any further questioning of his presence is unnecessary. We must focus on our duties and the threats beyond our walls. The council could not argue. His actions had already spoken for him. Liara realized that this was only the beginning. More challenges would come, more threats would test them, but, with Ethan by her side, she felt confident that they could face anything. As she walked through the gardens later that day, she thought of his calm movements, his careful strategies, and his unwavering presence. She realized that she had been wrong to doubt him, wrong to think he was ordinary. He was extraordinary in ways that even the Empire could not fully understand. That night, Liara lay in her chamber, reflecting on the day. Shadows still lurked, and danger was never far. But she felt a sense of reassurance. She had married a human she had thought common, but he had shown her the truth. Humans could be strong, brave, and wise beyond imagination. She understood now that appearances could deceive, and that calmness could hide strength. Outside her window, the palace stood quietly under the twin moons. The air was still, but Liara knew that the world was changing. Humans were no longer underestimated, and she had learned to see beyond appearances. Ethan Cole, the man she had thought ordinary, had shown her that strength could come in unexpected forms, and that courage could be quiet but unstoppable. And so, the empire began to shift. Whispers of human strength spread among the nobles, and even those who feared change could not ignore the truth. Liara had learned a lesson about judgment, trust, and courage, and the empire would soon learn that the human she married was more than capable of protecting its future. The story of Liara and Ethan continued, now marked by trust, respect, and the quiet revelation of extraordinary human strength. The empire had witnessed skill, courage, and wisdom that could not be measured by rank or appearance, and the princess understood that with him by her side, they could face any threat the galaxy sent their way. That the palace had never been so alive with tension. Rumors of human strength had spread quickly through the empire, and nobles whispered in every corridor. Princess Liara walked alongside Ethan Cole, feeling a mixture of pride and worry. She had learned to trust him, but she knew that danger was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and enemies did not sleep. Early in the morning, scouts reported a fleet of unknown ships approaching the planet. Their engines glowed faintly against the purple sky, and their numbers were vast. The Imperial Council convened immediately, panic visible on the faces of even the most confident nobles. They had expected trouble before, but this fleet was beyond anything they had seen. The palace alarms sounded, and the guards scrambled to positions, their fear clear. Liara turned to Ethan. "They are coming," she said quietly. "We cannot face this alone." Ethan's expression remained calm. "We are not alone. We have the palace, the guards, and our knowledge. If we act together, we can protect the empire." The council argued about strategy, but Ethan spoke with quiet authority. "Scatter the forces to defend key positions. Focus on coordination, not numbers. Use the terrain, the palace defenses, and human tactics. Calmness and precision will win where fear cannot." Many nobles were skeptical, but the attacks began before they could argue further. The alien fleet struck with speed and firepower, overwhelming the outer defenses. Valorian soldiers struggled, unsure how to respond to tactics they had never seen. Ethan moved among them, directing the placement of shields, instructing them on timing, and guiding them through human strategies that were simple but devastatingly effective. Liara watched as he led from the center, not on the front lines, but where he could see and control the flow of battle. His calm presence steadied the soldiers, and soon their fear turned to confidence. They followed his guidance, moving like a single organism against the alien attackers. The battle raged for hours. The alien ships tried every approach, but Ethan anticipated their maneuvers. When an enemy tried to breach the palace gates, he directed the soldiers to focus fire while he personally disabled a small squad attempting to infiltrate the halls. His movements were precise, quick, and deadly. The attackers fell back, stunned by a human who had predicted their every move. Liara felt awe and pride. The man she had once thought ordinary was now the key to the Empire's survival. She walked through the command halls, watching as soldiers reported their positions, following Ethan's calm instructions. She realized that humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because they preferred to show restraint until it was necessary. As the battle continued, nobles who had once doubted him began to see the truth. His strategies were simple, but effective. His leadership was quiet, but unquestionable. Even those who had plotted against him could not ignore his skill. He had turned the tide of the battle without arrogance or unnecessary risk. When the alien fleet finally began to retreat, the palace and the city were largely intact. The soldiers cheered, and the nobles looked on in awe and fear. Liara turned to Ethan, seeing him calm and composed as always. She realized that his strength was not only in fighting but in teaching, guiding, and inspiring others. "You saved the Empire," she said quietly. "We saved the Empire," he replied. "Strength is not just in one person. It is in how we act together, in how we think, and in how we remain calm under pressure." The council convened again, this time in silence. Even the most skeptical nobles had no words to dispute what had happened. The human who had once been mocked had proven himself beyond question. The Empire had witnessed human skill, strategy, and leadership firsthand. They began to understand that humans were not to be underestimated, and that calm, precise action could triumph where brute force failed. Liara took Ethan's hand, feeling a sense of connection deeper than duty. She had married a man she thought ordinary, and he had shown her what humans could achieve. She realized that her judgment had been wrong, that strength was not always visible, and that courage could be quiet but unstoppable. She felt proud, not only of him, but of the partnership they shared. The following days were filled with repair, celebration, and cautious optimism. The palace and city were safe, thanks to Ethan's leadership and the cooperation of the soldiers. Nobles who had opposed him now offered cautious respect, and whispers of admiration spread quietly among the servants and guards. Liara watched him move through the halls, helping, guiding, and teaching. He never sought recognition, yet his influence grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, Liara and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool and fragrant, and the twin moons reflected softly on the fountains. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride, affection, and awe. "You were never ordinary," she said softly. "I was wrong to think so." Ethan smiled faintly. "I do not need to be extraordinary to act when necessary. Humans often hide their strength because we value peace. But when the moment comes, we act. That is all." She took his hand firmly. "Your calm, your skill, your courage, it changed everything. You changed the Empire's view of humans, and you changed me." He nodded, understanding her completely. "I only did what was necessary. The rest is up to you." The days turned to weeks, and the Empire began to recover fully. Trade resumed, the soldiers trained under new strategies, and humans were no longer seen as weak allies. Stories of Ethan Cole's actions spread through the galaxy, proving that humans could be powerful, clever, and disciplined beyond expectation. The princess had seen it firsthand, and she carried that knowledge in her heart. One evening, Liara stood on the balcony, looking at the city below. She thought of the first time she had met Ethan, how she had judged him ordinary, and how wrong she had been. Now, She understood that strength could be hidden beneath calmness, courage could be quiet, and a simple human could change the fate of a world. Ethan joined her silently, standing beside her. The two of them looked out at the purple skies, twin moons shining above, and stars twinkling in the distance. Liara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. With him, the palace and the empire were safe. Humans were no longer underestimated, and she had learned the truth about judgment, trust, and courage. "What now?" she asked softly. "We prepare for whatever comes next," he replied. "The galaxy is vast, and threats will always appear. But we face them together, with calm, precision, and strength." Liara smiled. She realized that she had married more than a protector. She had married a partner, a guide, and a man who could show the galaxy what humans were capable of. She had thought he was ordinary, but he had proven otherwise. He had saved her, the palace, and the empire, and in doing so, he had shown that courage, skill, and calm could shape the future. The empire looked to the future with cautious hope. Nobles whispered of humans with newfound respect, soldiers trained in new tactics, and the people celebrated the bravery of a human who had changed their world. Liara and Ethan stood together, a symbol of unity, trust, and extraordinary strength hidden in ordinary form. And so, the story of Liara and Ethan reached its climax and resolution. The princess had learned that appearances could deceive, that humans could be extraordinary, and that courage could come in quiet but unstoppable forms. The empire had survived, the threats had been met, and a human who had once been judged common had proven that he was far from it. Together, Liara and Ethan faced the galaxy, prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Their story became legend, a reminder that humans, though underestimated, could rise to meet any threat, protect those they loved, and change the fate of worlds. The princess and her human husband had shown the empire and the galaxy that true strength is not always visible, and that ordinary appearances can hide extraordinary power. And in the quiet moments, under the light of the twin moons, Liara knew that she had chosen not only wisely, but courageously. She had married a man who had drawn his blade not for glory, but for protection, and in doing so, he had earned her trust, her respect, and her heart. The empire remembered, the galaxy remembered, and she would never forget. Their journey was far from over, but the first great trials had passed. The alien princess had discovered the truth. Humans were not weak, not ordinary, and not to be underestimated. And Ethan Cole, the human she had married, had shown her why.